I have spent over 8,000 hours in tactical shooters and tested over 30 of the most hyped mice on the market, from the 35-gram Finalmouse ULX to the Pulsar Crazy Light. But after thousands of hours, I realized that a mouse isn't good or bad in a vacuum. If you play on a fast surface and you feel like your aim is shaky or inconsistent, the industry solution is usually buy a lighter mouse. I'm here to tell you that's exactly why you're missing. Today I want to show you why weight is often a marketing mask for poor engineering, how to identify if your mouse is actually fighting your mousepad, and the technical settings you need to master to stop overshooting your targets. Now, to fix your aim, you first have to understand the friction equation. Every setup is a balance between the friction of your pad and the inertia of your mouse. When you move to a fast surface like a glass pad or a high-speed cloud pad, you are basically removing the mechanical brake from your aim. The industry logic says that a lighter mount is better because it has less inertia. Now, on paper that makes sense, but in a 1v3 clutch, when your heart rate is 140 and your hand has micro tremors, that 35-gram mouse becomes a liability. It has no stability, it amplifies every mistake, every pulse and every shake directly into a game. This is the stability paradox. By using a mouse that is too light for a fast pad, you are forced to tense your hand muscles just to keep your crosshair still. The tension is the silent killer of consistency. You might hit crazy shot in practice, but under pressure you crumble because you're fighting your own hardware. Switching to a denser mouse, in this case the 60-gram OP1w, wasn't about wanting a heavier mouse, it was about adding a low pass filter to my aim. The extra mass provides the inertia that a fast pad lacks. It will smooth out the human noise and allows you to relax your grip. And any pro will tell you a relaxed hand is always faster and more precise than a tensed one. But density is only half the situation. A stable mouse is useless if the shape doesn't allow you to leverage the stability. And this is where I found most safe shapes fail the reality test. When companies race to hit a weight target like 30 or 35 grams, they almost always sacrifice build integrity. They thin out the plastic, they use hollow shells, and they create mice that feel like toys. Now I know that a lot of companies recently switched to magnesium or carbon, but they still have the same problem. The OP1 for me is a different philosophy. It's small, actually narrower than the ultralight X, but it's dense. Now for me that solidity matters because it creates like a consistent feedback loop for my hand. You know exactly where the mouse is in your palm all the time, so you don't really overshoot or undershoot. Then there is also the geometry. Most hyped mouses use like rounded, safe curves to appeal to the widest possible audience. The OP1 uses flat, almost vertical sides. For a claw or a fingertip grip, this is a massive advantage for consistency. Now on a rounded mouse, your fingers can slightly shift during a fast flick or a long spray. On a mouse with flat sides, you have a physical ledge to lock into. Now for me it's a mechanical leverage, you aren't squeezing the mouse to maintain control, the shape handles that stability for you. And combining that with a top tier coating that actually grips your skin as it warms up, and you realize that 60 gram of locked in control is significantly faster than 35 grams of slippery instability. Yeah, and I know that you can add grip tips on your final mouse, but if I spend like $200 on a mouse for its design, I want to at least see it. So this build quality is what allows for stable platform, but the real gap between marketing mice and performer mice appears when you look at how the technology inside is actually implemented. We need to talk about the spec sheet trap. Right now every brand is pushing like 8K Hz polling rate as the next big thing, but having a high polling rate is not the same as having a stable polling rate. Now I have tested several 8K Hz implementations, including on the Finalmouse Ultralight X. In my experience it was inconsistent. I dealt with micro stutters and occasional freezes that made the game feel choppier than on 1K Hz. Now it felt like the marketing department demanded a number that the engineering team couldn't quite stabilize. Now compare that to the OP1 8K wired, it is the first 8K implementation I've used that feels like flawless. In my opinion, that's a testament to the fact that Endgame prioritized firmware over the hype. So why do I choose the 4K wireless version for my main? On a glass pad, the tiny variable pull of a cable is a bigger detriment to my aim than the theoretical gain of 8K. And I will gladly take 4K with 100% freedom of movement over 8K with a cable variable. In tactical shooters, the winner isn't the one with the higher specs on paper, it's the one with the most predictable outcome. However, even with flawless engineering, you can still ruin your performance if you don't understand how to configure the internal settings of your setup. Now, if you decide to audit your setup, there are 3 settings that define the feel of a high-end mouse. Most players leave these on default, and that's a mistake. First, click latency. The OP1 mouse has a feature called GX speed mode. It uses SPTT switch logic to bypass the standard inbounds delay. Most mice add a few milliseconds of lag to prevent double clicking, and this mode removes that delay. It makes the clicks feel telepathic. In a game of milliseconds, having the fastest clicks I ever tested is a tangible advantage. Second is the polling rate. I stay at 4K Hz on a 480 Hz monitor. For me, the difference in smoothness compared to 1K Hz is kinda visible. It makes tracking targets feel more analog and less digital, if that makes sense. And for me, it's the sweet spot for performance without compromising system stability. Third is motion sync. I keep this off. I know that a lot of companies have this built into the mouse and you can't really even turn it off in the first place, but if you have the option, I always turn it off. Now, motion sync tries to align mouse polling rate with your monitor monitor refresh cycles. It looks great on a graph, but it introduces a processing layer that feels like floaty to me, if that makes sense. Now, I want raw input, I want my hand and the cursor to be one-on-one, even if the data isn't perfectly synchronized, if that makes sense. And if I turn it off, it makes my mouse feel much more better and responsive. So these optimizations are the final 5% of the journey, but the real question remains, how do you know if you're a victim to the ultralight trend? Now the takeaway here isn't that you should go out and buy a heavy mouse, that makes no sense. The takeaway is that your gear must match your environment. If you play on a slow, muddy cloth pad, you might need that 35-gram mouse to help you break that initial friction. In that case, weight is your friend. But if you use like a fast setup, glass or fast cloth, and you find yourself overshooting a rot or shaking, you have a stability deficit. Your mouse is too light for your pad, you don't need a new pad, you need actually a mouse with more density. Now I use the OP1 because it's the best example of engineering winning over marketing. It provides the stability I need on glass, the fastest clicks I ever tested, and a shape that doesn't slip. It's a tool built for consistency, not for a spec sheet. Now audit your setup, don't follow the meta. Sometimes to go faster you need a little more weight. Now the algorithm also thinks that you might need to watch this next video.